Open Tobias Harris, and Tobias drills it! Sixers up one!
Embiid fakes, Embiid down the lane!
What is going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode right here on PickSwap Media. In this video, I want to dive into another draft prospect, this being Terrence Shannon Jr. of Illinois. A bit of a controversial topic here as he has dealt with some serious off-the-court legal issues. He was officially cleared of these. I've been holding off on doing a breakdown video until I knew that was going to be the case. So I know this is kind of a bit of a controversial one here. I'll say personally, I do want to officially acknowledge that he is cleared of this case, that he has been, in the eyes of the law, found not guilty. A jury in Kansas found that former Illinois basketball star Terrence Shannon Jr. not guilty of felony rape and aggravated sexual assault charges Thursday following a week-long trial. That is kind of the official diagnosis as long as he's cleared in the eyes of the law, and it does seem like that there is going to be any ongoing issues, that this is a closed book at this point in time. I'm going to believe that as well, that I do think this was a guy that was dealt a bit of a bad hand, and it's very frustrating and disappointing, and do feel bad for the guy, assuming that is the case, and that's how all this happened. So I understand there's quite a bit of opinions there. I personally am a person who can't quite overlook some character flaws on guys. To give an example, Miles Bridges is a dude that I would be unwilling to have on the Sixers, regardless of the talent level and how clearly talented he is as a basketball player. But there's some baggage there and some really poor character indications that I just can't quite overlook to root for the guy as a basketball player. I don't think that is the case with Terrence Shannon Jr. as he's officially been cleared. Obviously, you hope that this is fully the case. The law got it right, and that if there were consequences necessary, he would be serving them right now. But that is not going to be the case, that this is a guy who is, by all accounts, cleared, legal, and will be intending his focus on the NBA draft of now. So that's the topic that I really want to discuss today, is how does he project as an actual NBA player? And this is a situation where, take away all the off-court drama, and just as a basketball player, I think he's far more talented than he has been given credit. So I do want to dive into what he brought from a stat standpoint, take a look at his highlights, and overall just talk about his fit at the NBA level. So let's begin by taking a look at his stats here. He's one of the older prospects in this year's draft, spent 5 seasons in college, his first 3 at Texas Tech and his final 2 at Illinois. He's a guy that kind of intrigued me during his Texas Tech days, even that if you want to look at that sophomore year is where he kind of came on the map, at least in my world. Averaged 12.9 points per game, this being back in 2020, 2021. 12.9 points per game, 4.0 rebounds, 1.4 assists, 1.1 steals. Shot the ball relatively well, 35.7% from 3. It's been a bit of a mixed bag and kind of an up and down experience for his perimeter shooting. If you want to look across the 5 years here, that he went 25.7% as a freshman, 35.7% the year after that, up to 38.4% in his final year at Texas Tech, which was the best number that he posted during his collegiate career. But he did see an increase in volume the final 2 seasons at Illinois, shot 32.1% on 5 attempts per game back last season, and then 36.2% on 6.7 3-point attempts per game this year. And overall this year, he really flourished. And in 33.9 minutes per game, he averaged 23 points, 4.0 rebounds, 2.3 assists, 1.0 steal, 0.9 blocks, 2 turnovers per game, which is not too awful of a number considering how high usage he was. You would prefer the assist to turnover be a bit better than 1-to-1, but still not awful there. And the biggest number that jumps out to me, look at those free throw attempts, 8.6 free throw attempts per game at an 80% rate there. That is the number one thing that has stood out in his game to me, is the way that he attacks the rim is really impressive stuff. Now, he's a bit of a blend from a positional standpoint. I think ultimately that, I think I disagree with most of the perception here. I've seen a lot about him projecting as a wing at the NBA level. I think he's going to end up just being kind of a bigger guard. That's where I think he can be the most impactful. That I think, looking at the moments in which he was at his best, it is the way he's just physical, gets downhill, drives. And I think the more you can create an advantage by hoping that he's the bigger of his matchup, the better. But let's take a look at the film here. There are some slight mechanical concerns with the shot. I don't buy into him as much as I've seen some of the hype there, but he certainly has a little bit more of a push shot than you would like to be the case. But let's take a look at some of these highlights from last season at Illinois. You can see him with the ball in his hand there. A little bit of a step back, and you can see kind of the push shot there. Again, it's not something that I'm super worried about, but I've certainly seen some concern when reading upon it. It's his ability to attack in transition and just in general that is the reason I have belief. And this type of finish is why that is the case. Number one, through some contact here, but look at the advanced finish, almost a little Euro step, and he does do a really nice job of floating through the air. And as far as the release as a whole, I'm going to do it. This is a pretty good example of it here. Here's the concern is he's always a guy that needs to bring the ball down. I know I've been quite complimentary of a guy like Nico Batum, who does the no dip 3-pointers. I don't need guys to be capable of doing that, but you can see the way that he does have to bring it down before letting it fly here, ultimately knocks it down, and that is the end result. And of course, he is a lefty that you can see that through these tape. I do think he looks a little bit more comfortable off the pull-up than off the catch and shoot. There's a number of guys that is the case for, but it is him getting downhill that you're seeing. And it's not the cleanest 3-point release. And again, that's what I love. That is to me the Terrence Shannon Jr. experience here is you can see the way that he's effective as a cutter, can get his head down and get to the rack here. So a nice little, they play through the big man here, a little dump off, and he's just able to finish. That to me is where he shines. Defensively, I think he's going to be just fine. He's a competitor. He does have a little, like, you can feel that he cares when guys are going against him, that he does take the matchup a little bit personally. I was really impressed with Shannon Jr. in the NCAA tournament this year. I thought he looked really good and was quite clearly like the driving force for that Illinois team, that he was ready to put that team on his back and really did for stretches of time. So that was cool. And you see a flash of the athleticism here, kind of this little jump hop. Look at the ground that he covers up in that and still able to stay in the air long enough on that second pump, the second jump to still get the finish there. That elbow shot is really intriguing. I think that's something that's going to be end up like regularly in his bag of finishes. He looks really comfortable, particularly coming off screens and getting that little pull up at the elbow. And that is a superstar shot. That is a shot that, like, I know in this age of analytics that it's either at the rim or it's 3-point shots, but sometimes you just got to take what the defense will give you. And I do think Terrence Shannon Jr. is cut from that mold of player. And look at him just get through this little gap here. Look at him in transition. This is pretty good defense by Ohio State. They're clearly swarming him, and he just explodes through the gap. They're unable to stop. He's just big, too strong, and too athletic there. Measures in at about 6'6", 6'8" wingspan. A guy that I would compare him to, and I know he's more of a wing than I think Shannon Jr. will be, but I see a little Jaylen Brown in his game, and particularly I mean that off the way that he attacks. The physicality, the way that he embraces and even creates contact, it's very similar to Jaylen for me. Now, he's more of a guard, more of probably a comfortable shooter, more of like a hooper in a sense than Jaylen Brown, that I think Jaylen Brown uses a lot of his athleticism, his physicality, and relies on that. There's some hooper instincts in Terrence Shannon Jr., where he just wants to take a guy, go one-on-one, and he's going to have his way. And you see him like going winding all across the court here. A variety of defenses thrown his way, and he still finds a way to answer. That originally they try and trap and blitz and have the big man get over the screen. Shannon Jr. is able to get around that, put the team in a bad spot, and then circles back and beats his original matchup. So kind of a cool play there. And again, it's him hanging in the air. Some of these finishes are really impressive. There's nothing you can do against that. He's just too big, too athletic, and that is a level that I do think will translate to the NBA. And here he is, a terror in transition once again, putting his head down. One of the concerns with Shannon Jr. From the basketball side of things is his playmaking, that he's not a guy that I have much optimism that he can kind of fill like a combo role or a combo guard type role, that through the entirety of his college career, just 1.9 assists per game. The highest he ever peaked was in his first year at Illinois, which was 2.8 assists per game. He's going to be a score first guy. There's pretty much no doubt about that. But again, I still think he can be successful in that role. I think there was a point in time in which I was ready to crown Terrence Shannon Jr. as a top 10 pick in this year's NBA draft. I've softened off that take a little bit, that I do think that there is a real world where the best outcome for him as a basketball player is more of an off the bench role to create his own offense, be kind of a spark plug to a team. And that's still very valuable. I don't mean to diminish that, but I do think that his ceiling is a bit more limited than I once thought it did. I do believe in the shot. I do believe that he will continue to get better. That will be ultimately the swing skill, as it is for just about every player. But there is so much there from his athleticism, the way that he attacks, the downhill desire and athleticism that he possesses, that I'm willing to take a chance on this guy. I'm very curious what the perception of him here is moving forward. Obviously, he had a more unique and troublesome path through the NBA draft process than any other player. I'm curious how much that is held against him. And obviously, there are the concerns that came with the trial and everything else there. But I will say that now that kind of he's back to normalcy and that he does have a true chance at making the NBA dream come true, a team does deserve to take a chance on him that is the case. And I do think that he will reward a team that ultimately decides to take that risk. If there were no issues whatsoever and he had gone through the process, there were no off-court concerns, I think this guy would be a cemented first-round pick, a cemented lottery pick, and I don't think that's going to be the case. I think there's a pretty high likelihood that he slips into the 20s, maybe even out of the first round. There's a lot of teams that have their mind made up, and to kind of reference a couple of these clips here, you see some of the intensity in his game in some of these that I want to flash back. I want to start with this three-pointer here. So for starters, I love that when he sees the defender go under, he's ready to pull it. Defender goes under the screen. He's already getting into his shooting motion right here. This is an NBA range three right there. Knocks it down quite comfortably. This play too, little jab step, little side step, makes the defender look silly and punishes him there. That's an NBA level move. And look at the physicality. This is what I mean about him creating and looking for contact. So he's out in transition here. You see the guy attempting to take a charge. Terrence Shannon just drives right through his chest, puts his shoulder down, and finishes it. And that is absolutely the right no call by the ref there. So well done there, not to make a call in either direction. You can see the hesitation in him here. This looks really good as well. And again, it is that finishing ability. He's one of the best finishers in the entire class. Shot over 65% around the rim this year, which is really good considering that as much as he is an explosive athlete and has the capability to be a high riser, most of his finishes were of the layup variety or the tough finish around the rim. He much more is prone to finishing in that regard than going up and slamming it. In general, I'm a dunk guy that I would prefer guys dunk it because I do think you leave some hanging on the rim every once in a while with this, but he does feel like he has that touch as a shooter and as a finisher around the rim there. They did a nice job using him off ball too at Illinois. I think part of that was because of his size and that there were other point guards in the picture, but they did a lot for him as a cutter, which is intriguing. I do think there's a world where you can maximize and utilize that at the NBA level as well. But I will say that, like, if that is the case, you're probably looking more towards that wing archetype. But the bottom line is the dude's a basketball player. The dude's very good. And that kind of positional versatility is intriguing. That should be looked at as a positive, not a negative. And this is an intriguing little shot that I want to highlight here. Look at the quick release on this one. The quick release is becoming more and more valuable. We're going to highlight this exactly. He's coming off a dribble handoff here. And you see he doesn't even have to switch anything. That it is the handoff. He caught it and released it in that form. And yes, there's 3 on the shot clock, so he was in a bit of a rush there. That wasn't the most natural shooting motion, but I do think that that is notable, and that speaks to another level of potentially uncovered potential that we've seen from Terrence Shannon Jr. If he can just be a league average shooter with these tools as a driver, with a little bit of intrigue as a defender, I do think he's going to be a guy that's going to be much more than an average defender, at least. I think at the bottom line, he'll be good. I don't think I see him probably elevating to like the all NBA or, defensive player of the year conversation by any means, or all defensive team, anything like that. But I think he'll be a guy that you can rely on in the half court and to take a high level creator on the opposing team. He's not going to be a guy that you have to hide on the defensive end. I do wish the wingspan was a little bit longer at 6'8". There were rumors of it being longer for a period of time. That ultimately did not show face or occur. So he is what he is from a athleticism and body standpoint. I know I mentioned he's one of the older guards or just players in this draft period at 23, but I do think that speaks to his win now ability, that he's going to be ready to make an impact. And I've stopped looking at age as like a negative in the draft. Yes, it may mean the ceiling is a little bit lower, but there is a little more polish on these guys as they make that NBA leap there. So I am a believer in Terrence Shannon Jr. I do think he's a guy that deserves to be a first-round pick who has all the on-court abilities for every question that should be asked there. I'm glad that we can kind of talk about him in this light, as there is not this overhanging issue from the off-court drama and trial that was obviously occurring, and prayers up for everyone involved in that. Of course, glad that things have worked themselves out, and hopefully this is just the start of Terrence Shannon Jr., that this is just an example of a good kid getting caught in a bad situation, not the start of anything bad. So while that may raise some flags for some teams, I do think there is a team that should be willing to give him a chance, and I think just purely as a basketball player that they will be rewarded as such. I'm going to put a poor man's Jaylen Brown as the ultimate player comparison for him there. So let me know if you agree with that, if you have any other player that you think is closer to that, and any other comments that you might have. So appreciate you tuning into this video tonight. Make sure you are smashing that subscribe button to keep the channel growing, dropping a like on this video, and I'll talk with you next time right here on PickSwap Media.